today is going to be recorded. Thank you, everybody. Happy Friday, and thank you for joining our monthly webinar in education. And it's going to be the last for this year, so we are very, very excited and relevant to talk about different activities and how you close the year and all those great things that related to year-end closing and so forth and so forth. My name is Oren Tabib, and I am the CEO and President of Pioneer B1. We are an SAP partner here in Arizona and service clients all over the US. And I'm glad to have with me today, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you, Oren. Happy to be here with you today, and happy Friday, everyone. Excited to be here to end 2020 on a good note and roll into 2021. So thanks for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. With that being said, I'm going to stop my camera so we can focus on the presentation, and let's see what we want to cover today. So today we're going to focus on providing you knowledge and understanding of year-end closing. We're going to looking in a business one environment. We're going to talk about a lot of things: how to open a new period, how to do the year-end closing, what things we need to check, and going to review 1099. So let's look at the agenda. We're going to start with how you set up new period and what things to look at when you set up a new period and what to do with the current period to extend the due dates and things of that nature. We're going to look at year-end closing activities, what you may need to do, in February when you're ready to close the year. We're going to review also the year-end closing utility that is available and help you automate all those closing activities. We're going to look at different reports and some of the reports that will support closing the year and some of the reports that may be different options after running that utility. And we're going to wrap up with 1099 handling and reporting, and of course present additional documentation that may help you and support your year-end closing.
Awesome, thanks, Oren. And to go ahead and get started, we're going to cover new period creation and definitions within SAP Business One. This includes how we define a new period, what the different period statuses and authorizations are, and a little tip and trick for you about extending a due date. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and hop over to our SAP. And here we are. So first, to manage your posting periods in SAP, you're going to go ahead and navigate to Administration, System Initialization, and Posting Periods. So as you can see here in our demo database, we have tons of existing periods from 2006 all the way to 2020, our current year. So to begin with, I'm just going to drill into one of our existing periods, which happens to be December of 2020. So we can take a look. The most important thing here to note on the posting period window is actually the period status. So there's 4 different statuses here, and they each kind of mean a different thing, and they're very important to conducting your transactions. The first here is unlocked. This means that the period's open. All users can post all transaction types and documents into a period that is of unlocked status. The next is unlocked except sales. This one, the period is still open for posting all transaction types except those within the sales or AR module. Next, we have the closing period status. If users have authorization to this status, they can post transactions into this period. But usually we leave this to indicate that only the year-end closing activities still need to take place for the period. And last but not least, we have locked, meaning that no transactions can be posted into the period whatsoever. And you'll notice here that we have, our posting date ranges. So we have here a posting date from and to, the due dates that are acceptable within the posting date, and the document dates as well. So here I mentioned that users have to have authorization for these type of statuses, posting into these type of periods. And I'll just quickly show you where that's at here. That's in our general authorizations. And if we take a look here under the general category, we have 2 authorizations, unlocked accept sales and closing periods. So this is where you can define which users have permissions to post in those type of periods. And last but not least, before we go and we close the year and use our year-end closing utility, you'll just want to make sure that all periods are not locked. That way you can kind of run that utility without error. You'll see here in my due date from that it's actually extended through the end of February of the next fiscal year. This is really, really important at the end of your current fiscal year, kind of the last month, think October, November, December. You want to extend that due date if possible into the next fiscal year, or else you're going to start to potentially get some errors in the system. And it's usually related to this. You'll see them when it says date deviates from permissible range. We get a lot of clients putting in support tickets for that. It's usually always related to the date ranges that are allowed here in the posting period. Really cool feature of version 10.0. Down here, you'll see that there's actually a checkbox here to create new periods with due date 2 in the next fiscal year. This means that when you go and create new posting periods in SAP, the due date will extend to the end of the month that you select here automatically. So you don't have to go in towards the end of the year and extend those due dates. 10.0 feature, really, really cool. So we've kind of gone over an existing posting period in the system. Now we just want to quickly go over how we define a new posting period. So I'm going to go here and click new period. And here I'm going to give my period a code and a name. We're going to define this for 2021. Usually here I just put the year. And here you're going to select your sub-periods. Most companies use months. And you'll see here that it auto-populates the dates for you. You just want to check those over and make sure that those look okay. Some of you might not be running on a calendar year, so it may be a little different. Now, the key thing here is you do not need to create a posting period for each month of the year. By simply selecting months here, it's going to go ahead and create those 12. So I'm going to add these. And you'll see right here, 2021, it automatically created our 12 months for us. So now that we've gone over the posting periods, defining them, their statuses and authorizations, we're going to go ahead and move on.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. You covered excellent things. And one thing to mention is that, you really want to make sure that you create your new period accordingly, and maybe even test how you do that in the sandbox before, because it is irreversible once you created the period. So if you started in, 2-1 by mistake, you cannot reverse that, and you'll have to wait for next year to create the next period accordingly. So let's talk about the year-end closing activities. We also have on the documentation at the end of this presentation, we're going to have a very robust SAP document that walk you through more items and in more details. But we gathered the main things that, kind of a must before year-end closing, and wanted to share it with all of you to make sure you kind of have a checklist to the things needs to happen. So, the most trivial things is the first one, make sure that all AR and AP transactions have been recorded. Some APs are coming, after the year end, and so AR maybe. So you want to make sure that really all your transactions are recorded in the system. Next thing is to reconcile the balance sheet accounts. And the main thing that we have clients using is the AP aging and the AR aging. So those are 2 excellent reports to support that. But what we a lot of questions and requests sometimes that the AR aging does not fit the accounts receivables on the balance sheet. So when you run aging report historically, you want to make sure there is a selection criteria in that report that allow you to display customers with 0 balance. So for example, if those customers pay, had about 12/31st, and they paid their balance on, January 15th, and if you run the report after January 15th and you do not check that box, that client will not be present in the report for 12/31st, and therefore that balance will not match with your balance sheet. So when you run it historically, we always recommend to check that box, and we'll review that later when we talk about the report section. Next item is inventory reconciliation and inventory counts. Many companies decide to do inventory counts and to adjust their inventory accordingly. So that's something you want to prepare for, and maybe follow our inventory best practices webinar that we have available on our website and also on our YouTube channel. So take a look at that for the different options to do inventory counts within the system. But the first item we have here is inventory reconciliation. So the great tool SAP have is the audit report, and we're going to take a look at that also later. The inventory audit report really allow you to see any transactions of inventory happen in your system and match it with your GL accounts, basically. And if you don't have any manual journal entries to inventory accounts, that should match to the penny, and we can look at that again when we look at the report section. Next thing, if you have any deferred transaction, deferred AP, AR, you want to record them before you close the year in order to defer the revenue or the expense accordingly. If you have any fixed assets, whether you use the SAP fixed assets that is available out of the box. By the way, we also had a webinar about that a few months ago, also together with you, Lauren.
Right, exactly.
So encourage you to look at that. But even if you do fixed assets out of the system and maybe meet with your CPA once a year to kind of record the depreciation, it's something that, of course, you want to do before the year ends. So that's another task. Of course, reconciliation of banks and credit cards like you may do every month. Make sure that will ensure that all your transactions are recorded. Next item may not be relevant for all clients, especially here in the US, because most clients here are using USD as the local currency and the system currency, and most of the transactions are in USD. But if you have different currencies in your system, there are two utilities to run, and there is a different documentation on that, and maybe a whole session if needed. But there is exchange rate and conversion rate differences utilities that allow you to true up those differences and post them to gain or loss of conversions. Next item is, as you finish the year, you really want to make sure that it's locked. Even if you're the controller and may need to do some additional transactions later on, you want to make sure that either it's in closing period status, like Lauren showed earlier, and no user really have access to that other than super users, or the better thing I think to do is to lock the period and unlock it when you do need to create some adjustment, because lock will really lock all users from doing any transaction in the locked period. And as a super user, you can always unlock that to make any adjustment you may need. And then the last thing that is going to be a great transition to what Lauren is going to show is to run the period end closing. That utility is really moving all the P&L accounts from last year into a retained earnings account and enable you to zero out those P&L reports. Of course, when you run that report, you will need to unlock the period December, basically the last month of the last period, in order for those transactions to be able to post it, because if the period is locked, it will not allow you to do so. So with that being said, again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. But with that being said, I'm going to transition to Lauren to show us how that utility is working.
Perfect. Yes, we are going to take a look now at how this utility works. I think a lot of companies and clients get scared of period end closing and closing the year. It's kind of a frightening and daunting task, but I really think that SAP's tool does a good job of making it really, really easy to do so after you've done your checks and balances. So we're going to go ahead and take a look here in SAP for a moment. Okay, wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that utility. That's here under Administration, Utilities, and it's the first one here, Period End Closing. This here is just kind of our selection criteria, similar to how you'd run a report. Here you're going to select all of your P&L accounts that you want to close out and transition the balance to your retained earnings. Here you can select your periods that you want to close. So here I choose my year, and then I can choose my from January to December, for example. I want to close my whole year. Here you also need to define a retained earnings account and also a period end closing GL account. Many of us can think of this as like an income summary account that's going to close out the books. The last thing to do here is to go ahead and just click execute. Don't be afraid, this doesn't execute anything just yet. It just brings up simply another window, almost like a preview window for us, which is really, really nice. Here you can review each of the P&L accounts that you selected and their balance throughout the period that you selected. You can go ahead and, if you need to dig further down and drill down, you can do that to the chart of accounts to review some of the transactions. But if everything looks good, you can select which accounts that you want to close. On a high level here, if you just want to select all of them, you can go ahead and click this approve checkbox. If you have quite a lengthy chart of accounts, that makes it easier. Last but not least, you're going to want to put in a reference here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say year-end close 4/20. And you're also going to need to put a due date and a document date in here. I currently recommend the last day of the current fiscal year, the one that you're closing. So in that case, I'm going to enter December 31st of 2020. This is a default remark. If you'd like to edit it, you can also do so. And if you needed to also, you could click save and come back if you're kind of doing a deeper review on some of the GL accounts. If all looks good, you can go ahead and click execute. You're going to see here that the table is going to slowly disappear each account as it's closed out. And so we'll take a look. And that was actually quite fast because we only had a few there. But it really only takes a quick second to go ahead and do that. And now all of our accounts are closed out. If there's no errors, this is really what it'll look like here. So now that we've ran the utility, it's always good to take a look at the result of the utility and what exactly happened. So to do so, I'm going to go ahead to the chart of accounts. And I'm going to navigate to that period end closing account. And I'm going to just drill into that. You can see here that my balance is 0, similar to an income summary account. That balance should zero out and all move to retained earnings. So if I just look at this, this GL account here, and I'm going to enter some posting dates to make it a little easier for us. What you can see here is that I have actually a batch of transactions going through this period end closing or income summary account on the last day of the fiscal year. And then I have matching transactions that move the balance out of this account and into my retained earnings on the first day of the new fiscal year. And that's by system definition. And that's how SAP works there. If I take a look at one of the transactions, for example, on 12/31, I can see that my balance from my P&L account moved into period end closing. And then I can also see on 1/1 a transaction that moved a balance from the period end closing into the retained earnings. So it just creates two separate transactions in SAP. And last but not least, just kind of about this utility, I always like to mention that we recommend, and SAP recommends, to run this utility to close the year versus doing manual journal entries. It can create a lot of issues with reporting if you use manual journal entries to do it. And this makes it a lot smoother, to be honest. So always kind of use this utility if you can. And, I always also recommend to go ahead and practice this utility in the sandbox before you actually execute it in production. Once you execute it, and if there's a mistake, it's a little harder to reverse what was done. So always do it in sandbox if you have the ability to. Review the transactions, review the reports after this has been done, and just make sure that everything looks good before running it in production.
Sounds good. And Lauren, what happened if you know, I close the year and then I have maybe need to post some additional transactions? Is there any process, special process for that?
Yeah, great question. That actually happens a lot, right? A lot of companies have additional adjustments that they may need to make later down the road. That's perfectly fine. You'll have to, you know, go back and unlock your periods to enter those adjusting entries perhaps. And then you're just going to want to rerun the utility for that period. You can run that utility as many times as needed for a given period, and it will close it out again. So great question.
Awesome.
All right. So now that we've taken a look at that, I think we're going to go ahead and transition here to some reporting.
All right, excellent. So on the reports, we thought of focusing on some reports that on some of them I touched earlier, and see the right way to use them, and you know how they may be related to year-end closing. So aging reports, general ledger, P&L, balance sheet, and you know, a checkbox there that we may want to talk about, and the inventory audit report. So all of those will support your year-end kind of options. So let's start with the first one, the aging report, and I actually like to use you know, this search menu. So I'm going to start with the aging, and it doesn't matter if we are talking about customer receivables or vendors aging, because when you are in January or February looking to generate a report for, you know, 12/31st of 19, because I'm still in 20, you know, we're going to get different reports. So one of the things we talked about is to make sure that we display customers with zero balance, and that if we do that and we run that report, what we see on the report itself is the totals should match our balance sheet. So if I look at my local currency here and I see a total of 10,620 here, we'll see shortly in the next few reports, I'm going to open the balance sheet and we'll see that it should match to the penny. So again, quick little tip, make sure that you have that checked. Another thing is, another report we want to talk about is the general ledger report, and we talked about it in our in another webinar we did about reporting, but this is one of the most exciting reports SAP Business One have, the general ledger, because this worth like hundreds of reports. You could run it in so many different ways, and there are so many selection criteria. So I can look at that from customers or vendor perspective. If I use both, I will be double dipping. So I'm going to run it now just for accounts. We have an option to see, you know, display if they are only reconcile all posting, or you know, reconcile externally or not reconcile externally. So for example, that report can show me, for example, all my good receipt PR that were closed to 12/31. So you don't need, you know, special queries or things of that nature. The other thing that is really strong on that report is that little expanded button that allow you to filter so many. So for example, if you close the year and you want to see only your, you know, closing transactions, you could do that here by selecting the closing transaction, if I found it. But over here on the left, you have all the transactions, AR, LP, and if I do, you know, closing balances, I will see only the closing transactions. In addition, you can search by a project, by an amount. If you're looking for some specific amount that you didn't find, you know, you can do that as well. And for example, if I do between 100 to 200, now we'll see all those transactions, and we'll be able to drill down into those and so forth and so forth. And if there are reports that you run every time again and again and again, you can also save your selection criteria here. So this is a report that's really going to help you kind of explore anything throughout the year, but definitely worth, it's going to be in heavy use during the year-end closing. Any questions, again, feel free to put in the chat, but if no further questions, I'm going to move to our P&L report. Of course, everybody are familiar with the profit and loss report, and there is no difference running that in the end of the year or middle of the year. But what I may want to show you here is that there is also a comparison P&L available. So if you're looking to kind of compare between this year or last year before you close and kind of make sure there are no issues and, you know, review any significant changes, you could do that. So I can run it from 1/1/20 to, let's say we haven't closed the year, we're just in 12/4, so I can do run it until today or run it until 11/30, and then I can do the same to what I want to compare. So I can compare 1/1/19 until 11/30/19. And by the way, if you have multiple databases, you could actually compare, you know, two different companies, two different P&Ls on the same database. So that will allow you to do that. At this point, I'm just going to compare between two periods within the same database. Just running that, and what it will give you your P&L, and I'm going to make it a deeper level. It's going to show you your current period, the comparison period of 2019, which we don't have data for because it's a new database, relatively new database, because it's on a 10.0 environment. The only thing, you know, we show here today everything that is available in almost all versions. So the only thing that 10.0 provides you is the ability to drill down into the chart of account from the P&L or any financial report. Next report I would like to present is the balance sheet, and on the balance sheet we do have a little bit of an addition. So when you run balance sheet, the one thing you want to look at is add closing balances. So if I run it to 12/31/19, you know, all transactions are going to be booked in the balance sheet. But on the balance sheet, we have really two accounts under equity, and Lauren showed those two accounts. One of them is the retained earnings, and the other one is the year-end closing. And the year-end closing affect the profit period. So the way you could run it is you could add the closing remarks here. And what the closing remarks here, if we do not select this option, the profit period that shows on the balance sheet shows the profit period prior to the period end closing process. The balance of previously closed periods is displayed in the return earnings GL accounts. So the balance will be shown either way. The question is, do you want to show it as on the retained earnings, or do you want to show it on the profit period? And when I run it, again, we've now checked, now you will see that difference in the profit period.
Right, and Oren, just to kind of echo your comment here and what we talked about earlier, this is another reason why it's so important to actually run the period and closing utility versus doing it through manual journal entries or something like that, to maintain this functionality in the reporting in SAP.
Awesome, thank you for that comment, Lauren. So again, if something doesn't balance for you in terms of the profit period on the balance sheet, doesn't match with your P&L, make sure that you pay attention to that little checkbox.
And Oren, one last thing, since we were on the balance sheet, can we take a look at maybe the aging? So the AR?
Yeah, so we ran it last time on 12/31/19, right? That's when we run the P&L. So if we looked at the account receivable, we see that actually we have here two accounts, one for domestic, one for foreign, and the total give us exactly 10,000,006. So just to make sure I'm not lying here, I'm going to run aging report again for customers, and I'm going to run it for, it's already set for 12/31/19, making sure that it's checked with display zero balance, and we can see that we have that 10 million.06, so should match to the penny.
Awesome.
Last but not least is the inventory audit report. So of course there is inventory counting that you may want to do that we talked about, but if we do want to see how inventory transactions, and we're talking just about companies that are doing perpetual inventory, which I believe 99% of clients in the US do that. So under the inventory report, there is inventory audit report. And this is why I like to use this actually, because it's sometimes hard for me to find it. But the inventory audit report, couple of things to mention here. First, sometimes by default it comes with a system date. So if you run your system by posting date and that's your leading date, make sure you change it. Second thing, if you compare, first what that report gives us. That report gives us the inventory transactions and its effect on your GL accounts on every transaction, whether you bought or sold, whether you use FIFO moving average or any other method, what posted to the GL account, this will show you. So if I run it from the beginning of the year until the end of the year, for example, I will get all the posting for this year, and that may help me compare it with some P&L account. But if I want to compare it to the balance sheet, and I may have, balance sheet takes everything from beginning of time until today, I may need to leave it empty. The other thing, I have all kinds of options here, like, this, for example, allow me to filter some specific items or some specific item groups. So through the years, you look at specific item or group, that makes sense. But if your purpose is really to compare it to the balance sheet and have all of that recorded, you may want to, get rid of those filters. All warehouse says it allows you to review your different, inventory accounts and select if you want to focus on specific accounts. You can display by item, and that will show you, all the transactions per item and the affect the specific item value. But you can also run it by if I do and I report to, again, 12/31, I will get my results per GL accounts. Now, if you have many transactions, you will get that alert that, it may take a bit of time, depends how big is your database. In our case, it will not take much time because we have a small database, but you may want to take that into consideration before running that it may take a few minutes or more. In my case, it runs fairly fast. I can see my two GL accounts here, and I can see the balance for each one of them. If I want to expand that, I can expand and see a detailed kind of in and out of each one of those GL accounts. And if I see anything suspicious or something that was too high that we can recognize, of course, you can drill down into the document, the specific document that created that transaction, and further explore what happened there. Of course, like any other report, you can export to Excel, but what I really like is not to export to Excel. I like to, do the right click here, copy table, and paste it to Excel, and then do everything else I need, because that's kind of an easier thing to do. Just to make sure, our balances are right, I'm gonna go back to, I'm gonna collapse, just check our balance, right? Is it here, 8 million.30, right? So again, I'm gonna go to our balance sheet. We'll run it to 12/31/2020. And we want to look at our inventory account in this point. So inventory here is 8 million and something .30. So match to the penny. Sometimes we get requests from clients that are saying, "Hey, why my my balance does not reflect the exact balance on my balance sheet when I run the inventory audit report?" 95% of the cases we find that this is happening when you have entries posted directly to your inventory GL accounts. And if you want to recognize that and see, explain that difference, again, you can run it by running the general ledger report. And in the general ledger report, I will go back to that to explain those differences. In the general ledger report, you can go to expended and you can ask, hey, show me all the journal entries, right? So if I do journal entry, it will show me all the manual journal entries. And if I go to the GL account, I can choose just my inventory accounts. Okay, so that will help you kind of focus, explore, and so forth. So with that being said, we're open to questions, but if no questions, I think that kind of summarizes that report and how they can support your year-end closing and even through the year.
Definitely. Thank you, Oren. And just to kind of wrap up here, we're going to hop over to 1099 handling and reporting. We're just going to give you a brief rundown of the 1099 handling within SAP. We have done a similar webinar in the past. That's on our YouTube channel. So if you have more specific questions about this topic, please feel free to watch that webinar, and reach out to us afterwards with any questions. For today, we're just going to talk on a high level about 1099 setup, adjustments that may need to be made throughout the year, and also printing your forms. So we're going to go ahead and hop back over to SAP right now. And we'll take a look first at how we go ahead and get that set up. So first, we need to go into the administration, setup, and financials folder. And here we're going to see a 1099 table. So the first thing to do is to just check and verify this. Out of the box, SAP comes with these kind of preset, but it's always good to just come in and check. So for example, here we can see our different types of 1099 forms. If I double click on a row here, it will bring up the boxes for that specific form. And you also see here we have a column for a minimum 1099 amount. So you can specify a minimum amount for any of these boxes, and vendors who do not reach this amount will not be included in your 1099 report. So after you've done your 1099 setup, there's also some setup that needs to be done on the business partner master for your vendors. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate to one of ours we have here. And the 1099 setup on the business partner is found on the accounting tab. Here you see we have an area to specify the default 1099 form for this vendor and also the default box for this vendor. Again, please note that I'm saying default. These are simply defaults. So if your 1099 vendor performs a separate service that falls into a different 1099 category, you can actually update that on the AP invoices and AP credit memos as you go. So here I'm just going to go ahead and show you that. If we go to an AP invoice here for this vendor, and it no longer falls under the non-employee compensation, but instead it falls under rents, for example, we can just change that on the fly for each AP invoice or AP credit memo. Last thing with the setup here is that if the setup is started kind of after vendor payments have been made in the current year, you're going to want to use something called 1099 opening balances. So that's actually here under our opening balances folder, and we have 1099 opening balance. You can set it for any specific vendors or vendor groups. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And here you can see that we can specify any opening balances that we have for specific vendors and specific 1099 forms and boxes. So that can be found here in addition. So after the setup is done and your year progresses, you may need to do some amount adjustments. So if you need to do increases to any amounts for your vendors, the only way to do it is really here through this opening balances function. If you need to decrease an amount, you can actually do so in something called the 1099 editing. So I'm going to bring that up here, and you can select your vendor codes. You can see what is not submitted. That's my radio button that I have here. And you can select specific 1099 forms and boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and select this one, for example. And I will select all of my 1099 boxes. And if I take a look here, I can see that I already have some transactions that are kind of falling into my 1099 report. And so if I need to edit an amount, for an example, this whole invoice was for $13,910, but really only 10,000 of it qualified for 1099. I can go ahead and reduce that amount here. If one was posted by mistake, I can even go ahead and kind of zero out that amount here. Let's see what else here. So aside from the amounts, you may need to adjust some of the boxes that were noted on the invoices or credit memos. So to do that, let's take a look at one of the AP invoices. I have an existing AP invoice here. And we can see that this AP invoice is actually open. It hasn't been paid yet. And so if it's open and unpaid, we can actually go ahead and just edit this on the fly. And we can update it to the correct form and box. But if the invoice has already been paid and it's now closed, similar to this one, you can see we can't really do that here. You'd have to go back to that 1099 editing form and just zero out the amount. And then you can add a 1099 opening balance for this transaction for the correct box that it needs to go to. So kind of some corrections that can be made on that front. So aside from the setup and kind of use of it, now the year has come to a close. We all have to submit our 1099 reports and forms. The way to do that is through our financial reports. You can actually run here in the accounting section a 1099-1096 report. So if I bring this up here, I'm going to run a 1099 report for what is not submitted currently. I can select what 1099 forms and boxes I need here. And in addition, I can run it for certain vendors. I'm also going to run it for just the whole fiscal year in general. When I click OK here, this is simply just a report. So it's going to show you everything that SAP recognizes from your opening balances, your 1099 editing, your actual transactions, and it's going to combine it here into this report. When I clicked OK here, this is really only showing the report. It's not actually doing the printing just yet, but it's as simple as going ahead and doing a print for this. And so when we go ahead and print that, and let me just give it a test here. You'll actually see that the system prompts you, is it a final submission? So when we go ahead and print it, we get this message and we click yes. That's going to mark those transactions as submitted. One thing to note is that the default print layout in SAP, it goes by the 1099 per page. A lot of clients that we have like to do the 2 per page printouts. So if that's the case, just let us know and we can help you edit that default layout so that it accommodates that for you. Not a problem at all. So we ran this and we saw that these transactions were submitted. One of the really cool things about this that I love is that if you do make a mistake and you click it's a final submission, but you made a mistake and you want to go back and maybe do some edits or some changes and reprint those forms, you can actually run the same report as submitted. You'll see here we have our transactions, and you can go to print again. In this case, I'm printing to a PDF, for example, so to not waste paper or anything like that. But what it's going to do is it's going to prompt you, do you want to unsubmit? So in that case, you can have the opportunity to adjust and reprint your forms. So similar to the 1099, there's also a 1096 report that you can run and print out of SAP as well. Yeah, so that kind of covers it for our 1099. Handling in SAP, again, we have a great webinar that's already out there on our YouTube page. Feel free to watch it and play around with it a little. Let us know if you have any questions moving forward.
Excellent, excellent. Lauren, thank you so much. So we are ready to wrap it up. So what we talked about today, and then we're going to review some documentations that are really going to be helpful. So just to recap what we did today, we looked at how to create a new period and the different options when setting up new period, and what to how to extend your current period due dates. Year-end closing activities and how to use the utility of the period end closing. We looked at some reports that will support that process and will help you with those activities. And we touched on the 1099 handling and reporting. So with that being said, feel free to ask any questions, but let's go and see some of those documentation. So we split to different documentation, some from SAP. So there is a help portal available online for 10.0, for 9.3, 9.2, and so forth. So go into that portal, go to the area of the year-end closing if you need to further explore, or any other areas. It is really, really helpful, and internally use it all the time. The second thing is a quite robust document, how to perform year-end closing. It has a lot of additional items that may be relevant for you. So this will be a good checklist to make sure you went through everything. Our training is kind of the gist of that in the main points, but this is a much more robust training and documentation. The other one is documentation about that we have created, kind of to supplement and to simplify some of the SAP documentation. We created a document for adding a new period and how to do that efficiently. We created a document for year-end with the SAP Business One. Feel free to take a look at that. We created a document not just for year-end activities, but also for month-end activities. Similar to year-end, but maybe a little bit more simple. So take a look at that month-end activities, and another document of setting up 1099 that Lauren really just walks us through. We also have our YouTube channel where we have tons of pre-recorded webinars and videos and things of that nature. So feel free to join our YouTube, follow it up, and any future training like this one today will be added to that page. And also feel free to join our tips and tricks LinkedIn page that every week we share different tips and tricks that posted by our internal team here. Last but not least, we have blog posts of every webinar and education that we did, so feel free to look at those if you wish to get more information and see our previous blogs. Google is a great tool. So when you have a questions, type SAP Business One in your questions, and there will be tons of resources available. With that being said, I see that we have a few questions here in the chat. So let's review those. Hold on, where is the presentation, Lauren? Let's bring it back, and I will go through the questions.
No problem.
Okay, but the J is created by exchange rate differences. Do we need to cancel them for closing period like the monthly ones? That's a good question. I think it's worth discussing that separately, because if you're talking about using the utility of the exchange rate, I think it includes a lot of stuff that you may want to consider. But the SAP documentation, the robust one I just talked about, include a lot of materials and understanding of those utilities. So I really recommend to look at that or to reach out to us separately. And then I see one other question. No questions. No, just we can actually it's by year end. I'm receiving a message when doing year end closing. However, the message disappears. I can suggestion on how wrong. Great. Go to Business One. Cindy will show you how kind of previous error is. I see Ben already answered you. Thank you so much. But one of the things we do, if you don't see the error message, is go to the window and system message log, and that will open the bar bottom. you could open that to show all your previous messages. So any error message, look and see reference and so forth. Any other questions? And feel free to close the lines if you wish, you know, or to open the lines if you wish. Ask a verbal question. I think luckily today we have a few minutes to actually review questions. So we were really efficient today.
We were.
All right. So if no further questions, Lauren, closing remarks from your end?
No, just thanks for joining. Happy Friday, everyone. And, you know, looking forward to 2021. If you have any questions, you know, or need any assistance with any end activities, we're of course here to support you. Just reach out and let us know how we can do so.
Sounds good. And as I said, we're going to give you a break during the holidays. So this will be the last presentation of 2020. We wish everybody happy holidays, and our customers, please join our year-end kind of party that we invest a lot of that to give you a great education and fun time. And really appreciate everybody. Have a safe, healthy, and great holidays. And we'll see you in January in our next education webinar. Thank you, Lauren, for presenting with me today. It was great.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Everyone, happy Friday.
Thanks, bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.